There have been several big issues in the news over the last few days, right? Migrants at the border, mass shooting in Boulder, mass shooting in Atlanta as a racist hate crime against the Asian community. As I've listened to the news and the politicians weighing in on these issues, I felt a deep sense of sadness. It feels like so many people are just missing the point here. They think they get it. They really do. And from a certain perspective, yes, they get it. The only problem is that I believe their perspective, the framework through which they view the world, is significantly flawed. The lens through which they view the world is primarily a nationalist lens, a lens shaped by political and national ideology that either leans to the left or the right. It's an American way to look at the world as a Republican or Democrat, and it's very difficult for people to make a shift away from a lifetime of seeing the world through this lens. We were all raised within a particular culture, with its norms and expectations, and we quickly come to accept that culture as being the right way, the proper way to see the world. We're taught to be suspicious of those who see it differently from us. But then Jesus shows up. Jesus shows up talking about the kingdom of God. And not only does Jesus talk about the kingdom of God, Jesus invites us to become activists in proclaiming the coming of God's kingdom. A kingdom that Jesus tells Pilate is not of this world. A kingdom that is from another place. A statement that would see Peter remind Christians that we are indeed aliens and strangers in the world. A thought that the Apostle Paul would also pick up on when he tells Christians that we are diplomats of a foreign nation, stating that we are therefore Christ's ambassadors. In fact, Jesus actually invites us into his family. And the criteria for family membership is not based on nation, ethnicity, economics, gender, or any other criteria that the world likes to impose on us. The criteria for family membership is simply this: whoever does the will of my Father in heaven, says Jesus. Jesus invites us into his family, asking us to follow him and declare our citizenship in the kingdom of God. To become a U.S. citizen, you have to pass an examination. It's a civics test, it's a history test, it's supposedly designed to demonstrate an understanding of the nation you're about to declare your allegiance to. If you pass the test and you pass the interview with an immigration officer, then you can attend a naturalization ceremony where you will first renounce your former allegiances before declaring your allegiance to the United States of America. The words that you would speak on that occasion are this: I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. The language is strong and powerful and abundantly clear in what it expects from the person taking the oath. And that's exactly why, after almost 30 years of living here in the U.S., I have yet to become a citizen. The United States wants your allegiance. It wants you to think, act, and live for the benefit of the nation. The problem is, Jesus also wants your allegiance. He wants you to act, think, and live for the kingdom of God. So we are left with having to decide which kingdom gets our primary allegiance. Folks, the thing is, throughout history, from the time of Constantine's conversion back in 312 AD, many people have sought a compromise between the way of Jesus and the way of the nation. But as Wheaton College political science professor Amy Black explains, studies show that party identity is even stronger than religious identity for many people. That means many Christians would stop being Christian before they stop being a Democrat or a Republican. I mean, think about that. Actually, if you do think about it, I think you'd find out that it's really not a huge surprise, because we've all been raised within a particular culture, a culture that dominates our life, and for almost all of us, that culture has not seen a singular focus on the kingdom of God. And that's why Paul urges us in Romans chapter 12, telling us to not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but rather be transformed by the renewing of your mind, because then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. Christianity offers us a brand new framework for looking at the world, but it requires work on our part, right? It requires using our imagination. We have to learn to break with the patterns, the norms of this world. We have to be transformed. We need to be changed. We need to be made into something new through the renewing of our minds. Yes, we have to think. We need to know and understand what God expects of us by reading and rightly interpreting the Scriptures. I've spent most of my life trying to imagine a different future. A future in which the kingdom of God breaks into this world. I want to learn and I want to convince you to exclusively embrace the kingdom of God. It's not easy because it will often mean swimming upstream from the dominant culture. I mentioned 3 issues dominating the news again: racism, gun violence, and immigration. I just want to touch briefly on how Christian imagination contrasts with the way of the world, the way of the nation on one of them: immigration. Imagine for a moment if we took the words of Deuteronomy 10 truly to heart, where it says this: God defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the immigrant, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are immigrants. Or in Deuteronomy 26, it says this: when you have finished setting aside 1/10 of all your produce in the 3rd year of the tithe, you shall give it to the Levite, the immigrant, the fatherless, and the widow, so they may eat in your towns and be satisfied. Folks, that's some pretty clear teaching on how to think about immigrants. Conservative commentator Rod Dreher gives us the compromised position with the world. He says this: the Bible tells Christians to love their neighbors as they love themselves. But who is their neighbor? The man next door? Yes. The people who live across town? Surely. Those who live in another part of their country? Okay. People from another country who want to settle in their country? If everyone is your neighbor, then nobody is. Political scientist Peter Melander bluntly tells us what this means. He says this: immigration regulations are a way of embodying in policy a preferential love for our own fellow citizens. In 2017, Bangladesh faced an immigrant crisis as some 650,000 Rohingya Muslims were fleeing persecution in Myanmar. They were expecting no help from the United States under the Trump administration. So their Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, said, Bangladesh is not a rich country, but if we can feed 160 million people, another 500 or 700,000, we can do it. While neither Muslim Bangladesh nor Christian America represents the kingdom of God, I wonder, in this instant, which one comes closer to representing the way of Jesus? Here's my question for you. How is your commitment to Jesus impacting your imagination to represent the kingdom of God in the world today?